Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro. On WDET, I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Today on the program, from grilling advice to wisdom that's mostly true, Father's Day is here.
What's your favorite memory with Dad? Give us a call in the second hour at 313-577-1019.
Plus, when Black Twitter speaks, Hollywood listens. Shows pulled, scripts changed, and creatives elevated.
We'll discuss how Black Twitter's digital campaigns became a cultural force.
And boys and men are struggling. And one reason could be fewer male role models guiding the way.
We'll look at how male mentorship is reshaping young lives here in the city of Detroit.
But first, the documentary The Razor's Edge opens in the woods, where people are living in tents beneath a thick blanket of snow. A lone winter hat dangles from a branch. Plastic bags are scattered and trash. They mark the spaces between their fragile shelters. They tell us this place is a last resort.
No, they don't understand.
Do not want to live out here.
None of us want to be out here like this, but I think there's a lot of trauma out here, and it's mental health, it's addiction. There are people out here who have experienced lives that are very difficult, and they're just trying to survive. And there's no reason to like judge them,
Amen.
Yeah, like they have dealt with some very severe things.
Surviving without stable housing is hardly a decent way to live. Yet for many people in Detroit and across the nation, it's a daily reality. The Razor's Edge gives us an unfiltered glimpse into that world. The film captures the complexity of life without a stable home. It shows the harsh connection between poverty and food insecurity. It also highlights community organizations stepping up to offer solutions, like urban farms and nutrition programs for kids. Directed by Keith Famie, The Razor's Edge explores how real change can happen, and it underscores why humanizing the problem matters so much. The Razor's Edge was just nominated for an Emmy, so we thought it'd be a good time to talk with filmmaker Keith Famie about the people he's met, the misconceptions he's challenged, and the lives impacted by this film. Keith, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So, Keith, you're a curious person, and I realize that's what led you from a career in the culinary arts to filmmaking. But homelessness is a particularly raw topic. When you talk to people experiencing it, you're asking them to unpack a lot of trauma. In other words, it's not an easy subject to tackle for all people involved. Why did you decide to make a film about homelessness?
So, I think that it for me, it goes way back. It really does. So if I can just step back in time, I was 21 years old, living in New York City. I was working at the Plaza Hotel. I was a young apprentice working in the pastry department there, and my shift was from 4 in the afternoon till 1 in the morning. And what I would do is, when I got off at work every night, I would walk through Central Park, and it was during Christmas, and I'd cut through 84th and Broadway where I lived, and there was a Burger King there. And every night I would always go into the Burger King and get something to eat because, I was a 21-year-old guy and I was hungry, and then I had to be at work next day I worked 2 jobs, so I worked another job. But I'd go in there, and it was a snowy evening, and it was Christmas Eve. So Christmas Eve, and I try explaining to people, this is probably one of the most poignant moments in my life because it had such a dramatic impact on me. And I grew up in Farmington Hills, Michigan. Went to Farmington High School. I was aware of homelessness and things of that nature, but not really. It was never really in my face. While I didn't grow up wealthy, I didn't grow up poor either. So there it was, Christmas Eve. I ordered my food, sat down, and I watched this guy walk in the door pulling a like a shopping cart, one of those carts, and it was filled with all of, obviously, it was very obvious it was all of his clothes and so on. And of course, living in New York then at the time, you could not see those that live on the margins. So he walked in, big guy, huge guy, really, and he looked like he had 4 or 5 coats on. He went up to the counter. I just sit there watching, people watching and so on, and he ordered a large glass of, well, it was water, actually, and he went and sat down, and he pulled out of his carrying container there what looked like a wrapped up something leftover sandwich. Who knows where it came from, whether he brought it, it was something he bought, whether it was a garbage can or whatever. And he pulled out a book, and he put these spectacles on, and like a Rhodes Scholar, he's reading this book, and he with these glasses on, and I'm watching him, and I thought to myself, this dude's got no food, and this is Christmas Eve, and I was far from wealthy. I was living, week to week as it was myself, so I went to the counter, and I was just moved by the moment, and it was one of those moments in Christmas Eve, like the snow was falling down, you crunching on the snow. It was right out of a storybook feeling in New York City until this moment. So I went to the counter and I bought all this food on a tray, and I said to the gal, I said, listen, I want you to take this to him, and I'm going to leave, and you tell him that there really is a Santa Claus. And she brought it to him, and I sit outside the window and I watched him get this food, and for me, that was I've had wonderful Christmases. I'm 65 all my life, but I can still reflect that was one of the most cherishable memories of a Christmas Eve for me, because for that one fleeting moment, this person I never met, don't know who he was, never know his name, I was able to put a little joy in his life. And for me, it was a game changer it was a trigger for me. So that stayed with me. And then when I got in my early years, in my early 20s, a group of us chefs created an organization called Michigan Chefs Against Hunger. We would do dinners all year round, and then we'd donate the money to the Capuchin Soup Kitchen. And then every Christmas Eve for 19 years straight, 4 or 5 of us chefs would go to Cots, and that's where we spent Christmas Eve. We spent Christmas Eve for 19 years straight, and proudly to say that, and I wish we still doing it, we're not now, but we would prepare meals for the individuals that lived at Cots. And eventually my kids got old enough, and the kids of the other chefs, they'd come with us, and that's where Christmas Eve was. So I've had this deep understanding, respect, confusion about homelessness and food insecurity. Okay, fast forward to the future, and we're working on Detroit City of Churches film. We did film 17 churches, won 4 Emmys. It was very fortunate in that. And it was really a wonderful film telling the history of Detroit through the lens of 17 churches. But one of the interviews I did was with Father McCabe.
We're going to, I'm sorry to cut you off, Keith. We are going to talk about Father McCabe, actually, and we're going to listen to something that he says in your film. But before we do that, I do want to reflect on that opening scene, because listeners did get to hear some of the folks. Give me a moment here. So that opening scene, that was people living in tents in the woods. Some people might watch that scene and think, why don't they try living in a shelter where they can get back on their feet? But the folks you spoke with said it wasn't really their choice to be there. Could you talk specifically about that?
Yeah, and this will tie back to Father McCabe. So it's called the area that we're talking about is called the Pines, and it's right outside of Traverse City. And unfortunately, communities all across the country have areas like this. And, Traverse City is a very affluent area. I never expected, when I started working on this film, I never expected I would find myself in northern Michigan working on this film at all. But I have a philosophy. The story you're going to tell is never the story you're going to tell. You just got to follow the story and be open-minded to it. And we ended up in this facility, we ended up in these deep woods called the Pines, where countless of individuals live is the wrong word, survive in the harshness of nature all year round. Some are in tents, some are in just boxes, some are in this. And people always say, and this is the reason I did the film, the adage, you don't understand the journey someone is on until you walk in their shoes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I like to try to put that in a film to help people better understand the complexities of an issue. So in this case, so often, and I met it, and I spent time with a lot of these individuals. Some of them, they've lost their way in society. They don't have the networking of family connection. They may have had a traumatic brain injury from an accident. They may have mental health issues. They may just have lost their total ability to have income. And I'll tell you, it's a slippery slope that people have no ability of. But I'll give you one really simple example. Take your cell phone, throw it out the window. Mm-hmm. Take your computer and throw it out the window. If you have no ability to use those two pieces of equipment to interface with society and all the things simple as getting a driver's license, bank accounts, things like that, you're in trouble.
Right.
Well, if you fall into a cycle and you don't have the financial wherewithal to get yourself out of it, and you no longer have a cell phone, you become invisible very quickly. And then it becomes a very slippery slope. And then your entire day, this is what it was. I was amazed by. We complain as working individuals. Oh, we have a doctor's appointment. Or I got to go do this and that. Your entire day as a homeless person is survival. It's either where do I get food? Where do I get clean? Where do I get shelter? Where do I take care of any issues I have medically? Where do I take care of anything that I have to do politically, financially within the community? That's it. That's your day.
And I noticed in the film, we hear from a lot of folks, both people experiencing homelessness and advocates, who talk about how much bandwidth that takes up is just trying to survive, how little you can spend on time-wise, on headspace, how little you can spend thinking about anything else but survival. I do want to move on only because we don't have a ton of time here, and I want to, for a moment, look at how the film focuses on the power of feeding kids and how quality nutrition can change the trajectory of their lives. Talk about how that can break generational poverty.
Yeah. You know, this is deep for me because I'm a chef, and because of my history as a chef, and I have a deep passion and love for diversity foods and cultures, and having traveled all around the world and everything, and what food can do for you nutritionally. And in America, unfortunately, we have a lot of big box fast food restaurants that can feed food cheaply to families. The problem with it is economically it works, but nutritionally and that type of it is not necessarily there, and it becomes a very slippery slope with children that rely on nutrition, real nutrition, to grow their brains, their cells, their bodies, their everything that has to take place in those early years, and even teenage years and so on. And if the majority of the food you take in is really low quality, simple carbohydrates, very
high
limited,
sugar,
high sugar, less, the vegetables, the fruits, and all those things, it will send a child trajectory in the wrong direction for their health and their well-being. And then you just talk about food insecurity and what food insecurity means. To see children that have the lack of good nutrition or just good food, just food in general, and have to survive, it breaks my heart. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. If you don't have a soft spot in your heart for any child, whatever color, whatever race, whatever ethnic group that they fall from, that are hungry, there's something wrong with you. That's just it. And I don't care how you frame it. It doesn't matter to me. That's just a character flaw.
We're talking with filmmaker Keith Famie about his Emmy-nominated documentary, The Razor's Edge. It sheds light on homelessness in Michigan and many other places. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome to the Metro. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking with filmmaker Keith Famie about his Emmy-nominated documentary, The Razor's Edge. It sheds light on homelessness in Michigan and beyond. And we were just talking about food insecurity and how a lack of nutritional food can really shape a child's trajectory into adulthood. And I want to just close up the circle on that with you, Keith. The film highlights solutions to poverty and food access like urban farming in food desert neighborhoods. Could you briefly talk about how urban farms are stepping in to change people's access to nutritional foods?
Yeah, so I think that, we as Detroiters, I can never boast enough about Detroiters and how diverse and how harmoniously we work and live together, and we identify issues within society, and we dive into it. Especially, and I come from the chef community from years ago, but the chef community in Detroit is powerful. So urban farming, which takes place in Detroit, which we're going to feature in our film next year, Detroit City of Chefs 3, because we're going to do a film about veganism and vegetarianism, and we're going to feature urban farming. But urban farming is probably one of the best, most unique solutions to use land that's not being used to better the lives of those that live in these communities. I mean, how wonderful is that? And it's a win-win, because not only does it supply substance and dense nutrient-based foods, but it also teaches families, it teaches individuals to understand, appreciate, and respect growing, what growing does. It teaches individuals about just growing something that they may not have been experienced to. So it's a win-win in so many ways, but it's one of those things that you've ever heard the adage, I'd rather give them a leg up than give them a hand out. Well, in this case, this really helps teach a community, and they'll flourish and for generational. So it's not it's a one-time investment. As you plant the seeds of nutrition, you're planting the seeds of future.
It's teaching people
awareness.
How to fish.
Exactly. So, and once again, Detroiters have got this down, and it's wonderful.
I want to talk about some of the other nonprofits and community members that are working to make a dent in homelessness and housing insecurity. Could you tell us very briefly about one of the stronger examples of an organization that is achieving truly transformative impact, and what sets it apart?
Yeah, so in this film, the film, I wanted the film to shed the light on those that live and thrive in an environment that most of us can't imagine. At the same time, I also wanted to pay tribute to those unsung heroes of those organizations that have decided that this is the way they're going to spend their time in life. Think about it. How do you spend your time in life? Well, there are individuals that roll up their sleeves and said, I'm going to spend my time in life because I understand that in this short period of time we're here, how we impact others in the world is what really matters. So they've decided that they're going to help these individuals that are homeless, it's their food insecurity. So like the Christian Neighbors up in Leelanau County, 5 Fish, 2 Loaves up in the Leelanau Peninsula, Salvation Army here, Pope Francis Center. There are so many that this is what they do. This is their life mission. And today, in today's complex political arena that we're all thrust into, anytime those organizations are affected on the work they do is just wrong, as far as I'm concerned, because they're already struggling to help those that need support.
What I observed of some of these folks you're talking about is that they seem like very changed and evolved people from the work that they've done, from what they've seen about other folks who have fallen on their hardest times. I do want to zoom in on the personal impacts that each of us could potentially have when it comes to addressing homelessness. I'm thinking about a moment in the film in Washington, D.C. We meet a man experiencing homelessness named Thomas. He tells us how demoralizing it is to panhandle every day. Then we meet a D.C. resident named Marcus, who is not homeless, but he spends time with Thomas whenever he can.
I've been seeing him for the last couple of months. It takes time to get to know somebody. But I walk past them every day and every day and every day. Like I told him today, just walk with me. If I go get something to eat, something, you know what I mean? Just talk, see where you come from, because I might learn something from him and he can learn something from me, no matter the age. And I want to see what he's going through and if he can stop.
So that was Marcus, a D.C. resident who is not homeless, who's been building a relationship with a man named Thomas who is. Their relationship struck me as having a lot of value. Could you talk about why?
Yeah, it's really simple. I'm going to use the word curiosity as opposed to quickly coming to a judgment on somebody. So I think curiosity is one of our most powerful characteristic tools that a human being can have, is to learn to be curious about a situation, ask questions, introduce, engage, as opposed to sit back and just draw a conclusion to something that they visually see they think is the answer. And so that's a perfect example. We see people all the time, asking for money and this and that. And, I have a young grandson. He's 7 years old, and he says, Papa, why'd you stop and give him money? Maybe he can work. Well, he heard that from somebody else, but as I say, listen, not everybody can work, and we don't know that. And it's not our decision to be judgmental of them. If we can help somebody out, help them out a little bit. Listen, if you got to stand, I don't care. If this is the way you're making a living and you got to stand on the corner and beg for money, well, how complicated would that be? Okay, so what if you throw a few bucks their way and then you're saying, well, you're enabling them? Well, maybe not. I don't know. But either way I look at it, they're outside, I'm in a car, and it's hot out or it's cold out, and they're outside, I'm in a car. So shame on me for saying, here's $2. Come on.
Keith, you have experienced many things throughout your life that it sounds like have shaped how you view people's capacity to affect change. But I'm wondering if working on this film, if it changed your views of that, of the capacity that people have to spur change and to address our most intractable problems like homelessness.
Did it change me? I think it validated the complexity of homelessness and food insecurity. First, I didn't really understand the deep understanding of what food insecurity is. Food insecurity is not homelessness, but food insecurity is real. But to see that in schools and in affluent areas, that was probably a kind of eye-opening to me.
And of course, we should remind listeners that means having access to nutritional food.
Yeah,
food insecurity, not
just
having access to it.
Exactly. So I think that it validated why I wanted to do the story. But it also was joyful in the sense that I knew I was able to put a lens on somebody's story and help them let them share their story, let them feel empowered enough to tell their story, in the hopes that it will put the mirror on the audience, that will look at the mirror and say, how do I view homelessness? What have I learned from this, and how can I be impactful in the future if I've never really understood this? Was this something that touched me as a lesson that will help me with others, help me better understand the situation?
And yet the work of these advocates and nonprofits that we've been discussing, it also, as much as it can be impactful, it highlights the huge gaps in the social safety net. Should nonprofits and community members be filling the gaps, or should the government be taking a stronger, more proactive approach?
When you get into that realm, it's complicated, and I know it's complicated. I think that the everyday societal citizen, if they find that they want to be supportive of things like this, there are organizations that do a wonderful job. The Salvation Army, Pope Francis Center, the Five Loaves, Two Fish, Christian Neighborhood. There's so many organizations that do wonderful things. That reach out to them, learn about them, find something that maybe resonates with you, and help them out if you can. It doesn't always have to be money. It could be support. It could be other things. But should the government do more? Should private sector do more? These are complicated issues that obviously, we as humanity, we always deal with. So, but it's wonderful that there are. Let's put this: it's wonderful there's organizations out here that do this work. Let me just say that.
And I want to focus quickly before we run out of time on one of them, and it ties in with the title of the film, The Razor's Edge, which conveys the thin line between stability and crisis. I want to play a clip of Father Tim McCabe. He runs the Pope Francis Center in Detroit. It provides meals, showers, laundry, and other services for people experiencing homelessness.
Homelessness is basically people without shelter, without a place to live. It's a humanitarian crisis that we're facing in the United States right now. It's a problem of how we understand mental illness, understand addiction, understand trauma, and how we take care of those who are experiencing those things. I would say that all of us live on the razor's edge. We have the illusion, because of wealth or privilege, that we're not on the razor's edge, but one catastrophic health event puts us in that place.
That was Father Tim McCabe there of the Pope Francis Center in Detroit. Keith, how do you hope viewers will rethink their assumptions like, why doesn't that person just go and get a job? What is happening to them is because of something they did, for example. How do you want viewers to rethink those ideas after seeing your film and how people become homeless?
Listen, there's no question in life, we as human beings send our own selves sometimes on trajectories that may have caused a situation or that. Once again, I think that judging individuals as opposed to being empathetic, I think empathy is an important part of being human. It's it's a critically important characteristic of being human, of understanding and seeing somebody who's struggling and then having a desire within you to want to help and support in some way. So, yes, some individuals find themselves in a situation you could say, well, you should have done better in life. True. But guess what? Maybe another individual had a head injury or a car accident, or maybe they lost all their finance, maybe they lost their business, maybe they lost everything in the stock market. This day and age, a lot of things can happen. Empathy and caring is really important. When we set out to do this film, and I have to just mention this really quickly, the Pulte Family Charitable Foundation stepped up immediately and said, we'll support this story. There are organizations out there that understand the importance of these kind of narratives, these kinds of stories. And we are storytellers. We are storytellers from the day we learn to start a fire. Stories are critically important. And by the way, with everything going on today in the world, administration, there is nothing more important than stories and the ability for what NPR does and for the ability what PBS does. These are important sectors of society that help us better understand who we are, where we're going, where we came from, and where we're headed.
Filmmaker Keith Famie, his documentary, The Razor's Edge, was just nominated for a Michigan Emmy. Keith, how can people watch the film?
You can actually see the film on our website. You can go to v-prod.com. Go to Filmography, click on Razor's Edge, and you can click and watch it there. And thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, and you're doing the good fight for all of us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. Coming up, how has Black Twitter completely altered the way we watch television? We speak with a professor who wrote the book that has the answer. That's next here on the Metro. Don't go away.